Hi, everyone. Sarah Knapp here, founder of Mappy Hour. We're back with some more Mappy Hour live. I'm so excited to be having the East Coast Greenway joining us tonight. It's a project that I've been watching for a long time and have been hoping that they will come join Mappy Hour. They actually, years ago, Daniel, tonight's speaker, spoke at a Mappy Hour pop-up in Philly. So I'm really excited to have him back sharing with all of us. Before we dive into it, I have a few announcements and just rules for everyone. I guess I should back up to say, if you're new to Mappy Hour, hello. We are a community of urban dwelling outdoor enthusiasts. So we have chapters across the country. Pre-COVID, we used to meet up in person. Now we meet up online, and we're always looking for new ideas on who to feature, what to learn, and what we can do and build together in this new, interesting virtual world that we all live in. So feel free to drop your ideas in the comments here or shoot us an email. It's really easy to press contact us on our website. So that's a little bit about Mappy Hour, mappyhour.org if you're watching this on Facebook. And our next events are actually happening in October. We're going to be doing some phone banking. So if you have always wanted to do phone banking and signing people up to vote by mail, now's the time to do it. I know before I started phone banking, I was really uncomfortable with it and didn't feel like it was something I would be good at. And it's fine. You'll be fine. We'll do it together. We're gonna do it on Zoom. We'll have a chat where we can all like share our stories and ask questions. So if you've been looking to get involved and call some voters, then this is a great opportunity. And again, that's on our website. And before I introduce Daniel, I just wanted to say that we do have chats on both our Facebook and our mappyhour.org where y'all are watching. And I will be in the chat as the moderator. So please just be kind to each other. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I will do my best to answer them. And if I can't, then we'll kick them over to Daniel and John, actually from the East Coast Greenway is here. So feel free to say hello, introduce yourselves, and above all, be kind to the other people in the chat. And now, before we get started, last thing, thank you to our sponsors, Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, who has been helping us all summer do really cool bike and camping events to get people out on bikes, and the North Face that's been helping us create backyard adventures so that we can all explore closer to home and recreate responsibly. So with that, I am so excited to introduce Daniel, and here he is.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to Mappy Hour for hosting us. We are up and down the coast, so it's great that we can kind of connect with the New York and the DC chapters and the Philly chapter, and any kind of ones on the rise. So excited to kind of engage with folks that are interested in getting outdoors. This project, the East Coast Greenway, is very much about that, and I think we overlap in a lot. So I will get into a little bit about myself, sort of my background, the Greenway, what that is, sort of what the whole vision is, how it gets built, what sort of the status is of it, and hopefully some ideas about where it exists already, where some other things, some other trails exist that I can recommend, and yeah, we'll wrap up with some Q&A and talk more about sort of the regions that we're occupying. So excited to jump in. I'm Daniel Paschall, again, the Mid-Atlantic Coordinator. I am a nerd for many things, for trails. So this is me in the Bronx. Got to bike through all 5 boroughs, just sort of on a random trip with some friends, and got to find some parts of the Greenway. So I'm actually based in Philadelphia. This was a recent trip, just going up there. Anywhere I go, usually these cities will have trails that it's exciting to see that sign, that logo in different places. So I recommend, if you're on the East Coast or people on it, we don't have the whole route signed yet, but look out for that and look out for the trails online and see if you can find it. So I grew up in Northern Virginia on the Blue Ridge Mountains, basically kind of where the suburban area outside of DC meets the rural area. And I wanted to kind of just show where the origin, I guess, of my interest in trails I grew up a lot hiking. You can see in the top right in the Blue Ridge Mountains, I think it's Old Rag. The bottom left is the town I grew up in. It's a small village. I was really fortunate to grow up there. It's a historic town. They preserve all the old buildings. They do a lot of historical kind of educational signage, and I didn't realize how unique that was until, growing up and kind of moving out and seeing other parts of the country. So consider myself lucky in that respect. Growing up though, as an adolescent, those are kids in that photo that are very much having a great time. But when you get to a certain age, you want to go do other things. And a lot of that is through the car windows. You have to drive pretty much everywhere in order to do anything. And I think that kind of stuck with me. I really internalized that growing up, entering the workforce, going to college. And these are all just photos. I love taking photos and kind of seeing the environment through a lens. And a lot of times it would just kind of be examining these things. This was all before I studied planning. This was just kind of just an interest in how people create spaces for one another, how we do this, hopefully in a way to help each other function, to help each other get places, or, kind of learn about where they live. But in a lot of cases, you can see the two left photos, even if you're wealthy enough to have and maintain a vehicle, you're still going to be stuck in traffic, and you're not going to be in a great environment. And then if you can't afford that, you're going to be in spaces that you have to wait for a transfer for a bus that might not be frequent and might go on a circuitous route. So those spaces, I think, for most of our society in this country, that they're not working for people. And we really should think about the ones on the right, the ones that help us reflect, the ones that help us see, the natural environment, but also engage with people. And that was really what got me excited about public space, was when I started moving to other cities, celebrating these spaces for not just like the concrete or the asphalt, but for the people and the culture, the traditions. So these are all in different cities, whether it's a New York City Marathon, where one of the few times you get to see New York City strangers just cheering each other on for just that sake of them doing this ridiculous race. The Undefeated Divas second line, New Orleans. If you haven't been to New Orleans, go there. But the second lines are this incredible phenomenon in the neighborhoods that are welcoming, and they're full of music and life. And then, Philly Free Streets, this is more of a one-off event that happens once a year. We're trying to get to happen more in the city, but events like it are happening everywhere. Obviously, there's new COVID-19 slow streets, calm streets. There's all these other things that you might have seen around the different cities. And then just people being people. Why not walk 6 dogs in Manhattan with the city bike? Just New York definitely impresses me for, how people can kind of occupy these spaces and get the most out of them, even when they're not always built to help us in the best ways. So that's kind of what brought me into the planning space, about how do you secure that space? How do you make it for people and not have it be parked on, which is a tough thing. And I think all East Coast cities, painted bike lanes don't give you a lot of protection, even sidewalks in some cases. So these are some spaces, some linear corridors, some greenways, some trails that are in urban areas that really impressed upon me the importance of that, so that even in the coldest weather in those bottom 2 photos, you're able to get out there and not have to worry about, a truck or a bus barreling down on you. And you can get from borough to borough over the bridges. And I know that's a campaign to take back more space, because surging bike use has shown that it's certainly necessary, as it has been for a long time. So that really brought me to trails in an inadvertent way. I was in planning school thinking about bike lanes and intersections and walking and transit. And I took a trip with my partner. We went out to the Great Allegheny Passage from Pittsburgh to DC, and it impressed upon me this 5-day epiphany, basically, that, these are things that can work in urban areas, in rural areas, and suburban areas. And it's a really simple concept when it comes down to it. It's just creating and securing that space, but it has to be done with people again, that energy. So the East Coast Greenway was this other kind of massive epiphany when I discovered it and learned about the job posting. And this is a massive project, 3,000 miles long, to create a biking and walking trail from Maine to Florida, going down the eastern seaboard. And it's really important to acknowledge that this is land that was occupied by indigenous peoples, before harm and displacement and just really brutality dispossessed the land. So really want to acknowledge that. And as part of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, we're trying to work with our partners up and down the coast, with the native different tribes that we've connected with. This was a mapping project that was commissioned by the Alliance. Karen Harley out of the Durham area painted this on a deer skin. So really critical that we think beyond just sort of the modern day history, and thinking about what this taps back into. These are paths that were walked not only by Native Americans, by animals, by a whole host of life before us. So thinking about the modern day map, there's a whole bunch of people living on the coast, and we want to connect that in a way that hasn't been done before. There's 15 states plus the district, maybe a future state. And there's 25 major cities, 450 communities. Again, you get into rural areas too. It's not just urban. There's lots of suburbs. There's a lot of people living within about 5 miles, or what we try to see as like a bikeable distance. And got 2 Mappy Hour chapters, maybe more coming. So where is it at? Actually, this is sort of the X-ray vision of the Greenway. We're zoomed out really far. So, if you look at the New Jersey area, New Jersey is not entirely complete, but there's a lot of little pieces together. So when you zoom out, you can tell that that's a corridor that is mostly done, or at least a big chunk of it is there. So about 1,000 miles of the 3,000 are already there. This was an effort that we started as the East Coast Greenway Alliance, the nonprofit that I work for. That was started in 1991. So 1,000 miles after that many years, you can tell it's going to be many years more. But the good news is that we're accelerating. As we raise awareness, as we can expand, we've doubled in size over the last 10 or so years. We have coordinators up and down the coast. I'm in Philly. My colleague, Bruce Donald, actually is the coordinator for New York, but I'm kind of subbing in for him. He's based in Connecticut. So we try to work with local partners, and the only way to do that is to be face-to-face, and hopefully we can get back to more in-person meetings at some point. But we need to have that connection, because these are all local projects at the heart of them. And so they really respond to passion and just individuals that really want this to happen. So the vision is a connected Greenway, but that has to really be defined. And we don't actually, as a nonprofit, we don't own or build any of the Greenway. But we do try to define what it is so that it has standards, so that it can be replicated, but to the context of each of the communities that it's being built in. So the core of it really is that it's traffic separated, that we're not putting people in harm's way with vehicles. We want it to be, of course, publicly accessible, so free to the entire public, and it's inclusive, it's welcoming, and it's actually thinking about we're working with partners to make sure that everyone feels comfortable on this, that, racial discrimination, any kind of discrimination is prohibited entirely, that we're fighting that as much as we can. How does that look in terms of, this movement right now in the summer? How do we think about surveillance? Do we think about policing? Do we think about ambassadors? Do we think about unarmed ambassadors? Do we think about community members that have trusted relationships? Trying to peel back the layers of ways to build trust around the Greenway. So that's very much as important as the physical elements of the trail itself, and that it's wide enough for biking, walking, skateboarding, strollers, wheelchairs, dogs, any number of things that you need a lot of space, and you can't just cram people on sidewalks, as anyone in cities knows, especially during the early stages of the pandemic. People need to get out, and this provides that space. And I won't go through all of them, but you can look up more of the design standards at that URL there. And again, getting back to that inclusivity, we want to think about, as an alliance, we have to think about all the partners, all of the people that are going to be using this, and acknowledge, have our own internal reckoning that this comes from a very white male planning basis of, cyclists, especially, and spandex warriors and weekend warriors who are, I love their passion, and I'm often riding with some to explore certain parts. But at the same time, we have to build new relationships. We have to diversify internally, especially in positions of power, which we are working on. And as our partners in each of the metro areas, so the circuit trails in Philadelphia, their logos at the bottom there, we work together on this inclusionary trail planning toolkit, trying to look at case studies, trying to figure it out, mostly looking to ask better questions because we don't have the answers, but we know we have to do something, and it has to be urgent. So this is incredibly critical. And as this summer, as this entire year has shown, things have been upended. But one of the things that have come out of it, people are getting outside, gyms are closed, kids are cranky inside, so people go to trails. They're open again to the public. Usage has skyrocketed. This was just from March, but it's seen steady, continued, sustained increase over last year and past years. So really what that means to us is we have to build more. we can't just have crowded trailheads in a couple of spots. We have to have more spaces because a lot of people aren't living right next to a greenway or the East Coast Greenway. So we have a call for a greenway stimulus that's really about creating jobs, making sure that this is equitable infrastructure, that this is undoing the harms of the divisive infrastructure like the highways that were built through cities up and down this coast before, that they're accessing areas that have jobs that can bring people closer to amenities like healthcare, education, all those things that you need to have a good quality of life with affordable transportation, but as well as recreation and the access to mental health, getting out and walking in nature, that's not available to everyone. So we want this to be for everyone, and push that with collectively the entire country, honestly. So go to greenwaystimulus.org if you want to look more into that. So really, we've talked about grassroots. I've talked about grassroots and the entire nation, but it boils down to the regional connections of how does it get built, and we'll kind of get into that more. But I wanted to just highlight this map from TrailLink, Rails to Trails Conservancy has a really awesome mapping system showing some of the rail trails. This is not all the trails by any means, but you can see how dispersed they are. Some of them are long, some of are little tiny little just dots. And that is an inherent problem there. You have like all the concentrated ones around cities, but nothing extends beyond that. There's a lot of people that would love to get from one place to another if those existed. And you think about the East Coast, this is a mega region. Our sports leagues have DC play New York City, but really they are part of the same thing. They're part of this thing that doesn't see each other the same thing because they have ring roads of highways surrounding each one. And the idea is to get through a lot of those and to start connecting, the suburbs of Philly to suburbs of Wilmington, Delaware, and likewise up to New York and on, because this is a mega region. And you can see the lines there are already connected. That was already done from the top down. Those are the interstate system. You have, those are great for intercity connections. They're not great for within the city and getting out of the city. And so that's kind of what we're battling. And this is, a huge chunk of the population on a tiny piece of land for the country. And the trails that exist, there's a lot that are out there, but they're also in specific places. So the sort of low hanging fruit a lot of times has been already, created and made into trails, which is great. If folks know the New Jersey western border there, that's following the Delaware River. So a lot of these are following waterways. A lot of these, if you see the more straight ones, those tend to be the rails to trails. So those kind of are the starting blocks for a lot of these, but you get into the more harder to reach fruit on the tree. So want to show some of those examples of what exists now. So this is the Delaware Canal towpath. So built with no intention of turning it into a multi-use, East Coast Greenway. This was all about getting goods back and forth to the ports. This is all about economic mobility, but has now been outdated and changed to freight and trucks. So we can now use this space, and it's a beautiful corridor. Likewise with rail corridors, these are long linear spaces that if the rail company is no longer using it, it would be great to have a passenger rail to Annapolis from Baltimore. Maybe they can add that next to it. But in the meantime, it's awesome to have this amenity. A lot of trails have obviously been built in parks. So this is Druid Hill Park in Baltimore, a gorgeous park. It connects out of it now, thankfully, and continues, and it's connecting up to the suburbs. So expanding the parks, the reach of the parks, and access to and from them. This is also parallel to a rail corridor, but over a wetland, and just south of Wilmington, Delaware. Just another example of kind of following the infrastructure, but putting a lot of investment. This was a huge lift, and it's a beautiful trail. I definitely recommend getting down there. Hudson River Greenway, New York, maybe I think the most ridden or most used trail along the East Coast Greenway. Again, along a waterway, you have more of a buffer, more of a space. You can kind of create those elements that can add on, because it's not just the corridor for the biking, walking. You have benches, you have places to eat, you have places to sit, restrooms along there. And sometimes it doesn't look pretty, but as you look for places to put something that is accessible to people, this could be even made much more safer. It could be given shade. There's a lot more that could be improved upon. But at the very least, it's separated by this buffer for now. Hopefully we can advocate to improve it. This is through Delaware, connecting across the state. And then as you get into urban areas, you have to get creative. That's really where the departments of transportation kind of knock off the rust and figure out ways to reinvent a corridor. So in Philadelphia on the top and in DC on the bottom, both of these are from the last 5 years from Philly and just a couple of years from DC. And this is happening. New York is doing a great job, but it needs to be spread into more neighborhoods that really need this access. So you can check out the East Coast Greenways kind of pieces that exist now, because in between those pieces, we have on-road portions to try to help people if they want to ride from a trail to another trail, or even just follow, the route that we try to pick. That ultimately we want something as low stress as possible if we are going on route and showing people, but we have to acknowledge that in certain places that option just isn't there. And so in those places, for example, Truck Route 19, we have a little caution icon. I really highly suggest going and vetting these online first, checking forums. GW Bridge, I know has access over it, but I know there's construction right now, and I need to do more research to figure out what does that look like right now, because the last time I went was a couple of years ago. So all of this requires vetting beforehand, especially the on-road segments, especially if someone is confident but maybe a little concerned around traffic, because it's not pretty in a lot of places. So we do have a space on the way to get from Jersey City to Newark. This is again the Truck Route 19. Even if you get to Newark, there might be bike lanes, they might be faded. The bottom right is New Rochelle. I actually haven't been up there, but this is their main street, and you see the East Coast Greenway sign in the corner. It's very car oriented. A lot of these spaces, these towns, they're just starting to get it in certain places, but this is the norm. So much of the sort of our region. So that's really what we're fighting against. That's really what we're trying to flip and convince people and convert people and change hearts and minds, which is a long battle. So in the meantime, there are connections off of New York City, GW Bridge. Again, this was a couple years back. The ferry is really beautiful way to go. Trains do accommodate some restrictions. I think this was on NJ Transit and Metro North, but also Amtrak recently expanded their carry-on bike program. I think there's a few more slots now on more of the trains, which is great, the $20 fee. But Bolt Bus also has sort of a nice, not as well-known option that you can put a bike underneath in the carriage. You don't have to put it in a box. I think Greyhound requires you to put it in a box. So there are ways to get out and over those hurdles. You just kind of have to dig a little bit. So real quick, just getting into, how do we get those gaps filled? How do we fill in the rest of the trails if so many of those are, dealing with these obstacles? And, that really extends to beyond us. So this is just a snapshot, New York to Philly, and I'll talk more about that corridor later. But it comes down to partners. It comes down to relationships and, talking to folks. Really, the nonprofits, the friends of groups, they're the ones that the individuals just that, want this sort of infrastructure, want the ability to walk or bike, to work, with their kids, to get out, and they see what's outside and it doesn't look friendly to that. They have to drive to a park, they have to drive to a trail in order to see anything like that. So those are the groups we engage with at the start, and then we try to, make it overlap with the economic, the chambers of commerce, because this does bring tourism, this does bring economic development. Try to talk with the historic preservation folks. This is all about conserving what's there, the environmentalists, the stewards of the parks and green spaces, but really also the governments, the local folks, the transportation groups. It's a huge effort, and it's many, many villages makes the Greenway. So this was sort of a quick anecdote about that. Folks might recognize it, but this is in the Meadowlands. You can tell that it's not already very amenable to walking and biking. You've got a highway and then not much else, an old rail corridor. This is the Essex Hudson, basically Greenway in the to be. So this is coming. It's not totally official yet, but there have been some articles. There's been some stirs. We're trying to support it the best we can, but we're really, just kind of helping raise awareness, or that there's, a call for this sort of infrastructure. It's really Bike and Walk New Jersey Coalition, September 11th Memorial Trail Alliance. They're working together to get this corridor from the railroad to be repurposed. And you have this incredibly long trail to be connecting over, instead of those photos I showed of Truck Route 19. Imagine being out on a trail that actually connects you straight to the city, connecting over to Newark, with connections down a park there, Branch Brook Park, up all the way into Montclair. And that, of course, connects to other trails. And, we want to bring that down as well, down towards Philly and DC. So a lot of times it's also the trails that are on the ground, making those work with the local DOT, the local advocates, figuring out the space, the right of way and the roads to get those protected bike lanes. And the Green Wave has been a really awesome document. At least I haven't been very close with it, having been in Philly for a few years, but from what I've seen through Transportation Alternatives work and other advocates, they're doing a great job, and definitely recommend getting involved with them, as well as Brown Bike Girl is a great advocate, and New York City's bike mayor. They all have events. They have ways you can get engaged, see some of these trails, some of the bike lanes, but also some of what the neighborhoods have to offer. And it's a great way to find a community. And again, in New York, we have a lot of trails that exist on both sides of the river. They're in pieces. We don't want to get into the details now, but basically finding those edges of the city. A lot of those are having, there's a loop being built around Manhattan into the Bronx. And you have to have that connected network again, because a lot of people live out in Queens, Brooklyn. So if you have those low stress, traffic separated protection all the way, you can get to the Greenway. And that's why we want to work as part of a whole system, not just one line. So this is a plan from RPA from a few years ago. This is kind of our thinking for each of these metro areas. And that's in all sorts of stages. So you can find out more through the 4th Regional Plan there. DC, likewise, they have a lot happening. A lot of these pieces have been built in the last few years. We follow the Anacostia River Trail and the Met Branch Trail through the city over to Virginia. And we work with the Capitol Trails Coalition. They have this awesome network that's recently gotten a lot of attention, been adopted by the major, the Metropolitan Planning Organization there. So get involved if you're in DC with Capitol Trails folks, especially the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. They also do events, also have tons of ways to get out onto the trails and see what's out there. So I'll kind of throw a few items out there and we can kind of get into some Q&A. Wanted to just highlight, obviously biased towards the trails on the East Coast Greenway. There's some that are, just sort of side paths, but these are sort of the major ones. So this map highlights, you have at least 20 of these major trails. Some of them are more community trails. They might be a few miles, maybe like 4 or 5. But some of the long distance ones, like actually number 14, the NCR Torrey Brown Trail, goes all the way up into Pennsylvania. We're just on a piece of it. So definitely want to look into these, research them, because they connect to some longer networks that are out there. And if you are thinking about a longer trip, maybe find ones that are close together. But again, you have to vet it. You got to go to the mapping tool and Google Maps and the forums and figure out, what is in between. So our state pages is another good resource. We have one for New York showing the trails. Just, there's a number of them out there. There's lots more that are in the works. Likewise for DC, we have, again, the 2 routes going into the city and connecting onto the mall, going over the Memorial Bridge to the Mount Vernon Trail, which is definitely recommend. Really, I mean, this is Mappy Hour. Like, I would say grab a paper map. Those are the most fun. And find the edges, find the spaces that sort of off the map a little bit. They're not in the middle of the downtown or neighborhoods. Look for the creeks that have been paved over. There might be some waterways, some beaches, some promenades. Some of them, might have access, might not. That's why the bike maps certainly help. So in New York, some of my favorite spots that I found, just kind of poking around the High Bridge in Manhattan, this incredible viaduct or aqueduct. It's like I'd been there multiple years and never even heard of it for a while. So definitely recommend that. Rockaways. I mean, that doesn't look like New York City, but it is. It's crazy. Even Newtown Creek. Some of these creeks, go to the Gowanus. Like, figure out what the city used to be. And I think, finding those spaces helps bring back that history. The Bronx River Greenway, you have this industrial use, but you also have a lot of green space. You have a garden that provides food for the community. So this is ways to reinvent places. But again, discovering it on foot and bike is the best. In DC, in the metro area, the Mount Vernon Trail again, Anacostia River Trail. These are great for seeing like the wetlands, the wildlife around there. WBNA I want to highlight because there is a bridge coming up that will connect Anne Arundel County to Prince George's County. About 13 miles of rails to trails. Really beautiful landscape there. The Met Branch Trail, awesome trail, follows the Red Line in DC. It's growing, has amazing artwork. Definitely recommend getting out there if you hadn't seen it already. And then want to transition to a way that you could get involved actually next spring. So we are having a fundraiser. The East Coast Greenway Alliance is a nonprofit. We're trying to build capacity. We need folks in North Jersey, especially, to fill in those gaps. Fundraising is, core to what we're doing. So this is a way to support us, but also to see the Greenway and what exists now. There's a lot out there, and this ride basically would take you from New York City, or maybe right on the edge, Jersey City, depending on COVID, needs for spacing out in pods. We have to figure out how to do that. It was in 2020, so obviously pushed it back. But there's a lot to see. Some of it's on road, but a good chunk, about half of it, is actually on trail. You can see the sort of the dotted is the unpaved. That's the DNR, the Delaware and Raritan Canal towpath down to the DNL. These are beautiful trails that you can see on the kind of the left side, right under the NYC-Philly logo. That's the DNR canal. So you can ride those. We do also have alternative on-road routes for folks that don't want to ride unpaved trails. I get it. So we'll try to provide, some of those alternates. But we do want to have, really a showcase of these greenways as we try to connect them up and down. And so I'll give Sarah a chance to jump back in, maybe talk a little bit about maybe Mappy Hour getting involved with New York to Philly.
Yeah, hello. That was awesome. Thank you, Daniel. I was just nodding the whole time. So so I first heard about this ride when I was talking to you guys when, we were setting this up, and I got really excited about it. So I am committed to doing it, and I was hoping that we could get a Mappy Hour group together. So I kind of want to just put that out there. We don't have like an official event page or anything like that. But for those of you who are interested, want to talk about it, learn more, maybe join a WhatsApp group to discuss. My email is Sarah with an H at outdoorfest.com. So just shoot me an email and I'll get all of us together who want to do it and we can kind of start planning. So that's the big Mappy Hour announcement, kind of in the early stages of it, but sounds awesome and I can't wait for it.
So cool. That will do it for me too. So just want to reiterate greenway.org. If you want to learn more, we have our mapping tool too at the top. And reach out to me if you have questions. There might be a lot that I can't answer. I can send them to folks that are on the ground more, maybe in your area. But yeah, happy to go to the Q&A. I know that it's been moving a little bit on my other window. Maybe I can check private there. All right, so question, sorry, just the first one I see here. Evan asks, is there any coordination between East Coast Greenway and Rails to Trails? So definitely. Rails to Trails Conservancy is a huge partner of ours. They have a really cool trail from DC to Seattle called the Great American Rail Trail. So they're certainly connecting the networks, just like we're talking about, what I've been talking about in the different cities. They also have their Trail Nation networks. The circuit trails that I mentioned before for Greater Philly is basically funded through Rails to Trails Conservancy, the effort to kind of organize a lot of the partners. So we cut through, the city of Philadelphia, but there are other trails that are part of that network. So we work closely with Rails to Trails on highlighting, some of those trails that need more support, need ways to get involved. So the same with DC, Baltimore, and I believe in Miami. Might be wrong on that. Mike asks, when will the trail between Ashland and Petersburg be done in Virginia? I think Sarah Sanford, my colleague, basically says that it's unfortunately a long way off. It needs funding, but thankfully it's getting attention, and that's really where it starts. So definitely touch base with Sarah at East Coast Greenway Alliance. If you go to greenway.org and look up Virginia's state page, you'll find her contact info. If you want to get involved in that, it needs a lot of people pushing for it. Let's see. Sarah asks, what are these forums you speak of? Good question. So I vaguely familiar, somewhat familiar. There's definitely a whole host. I mean, it's the internet. It's kind of a weird place. Adventure cycling is one of the more well-established ones that has forums about biking different parts of the coast. They have a coastal route. It's not right along ours because there's follows on road routes. But forums like that, I would say, touring forums, bike touring. I know Reddit has a number of bike touring forums. There's not ones that we're specifically affiliated with. But again, I would say, shoot me an email if you're looking for information about a certain area. Because, social media, we hear from folks. There's lots of Facebook groups that are really good kind of forums, so to speak, where you can find out information about a certain area. So I'm try to be involved with the ones in my region, but those are generally the ones I've found to be really helpful, people sharing. So I'm happy to answer more questions. I'll keep looking through, but might be most of what came in during the presentation.
Yeah, I'll hop back in. Right now, those are all of our questions. But if people have any lingering ones, is there a good way that they can reach out either to you or the East Coast Greenway?
Of course, yeah. Feel free to email me, daniel@greenway.org. We also have just our general info page, info@greenway.org email. But if you have, especially something specific to the Mid-Atlantic region, even if in New York, I team up with Bruce, who's in Connecticut, and also coordinates for New Jersey and Connecticut. We're stretching a lot of ground, so we have to make sure we're talking to everybody. So Yeah, that would probably be the easiest way. I mean, but also, engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the usual suspects.
Cool. All right. So I feel like this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing this with us. And I wanted to let everyone know that if you missed part of it, or if you want to share this with someone else, it will stay up on the Mappy Hour site, on the event page, as well as on the Facebook pages. And we'll shoot an email out to everyone with all of these links that we mentioned tomorrow. So if you're signed up, you'll get one of those. And that's it for tonight. And thank you all for joining. And thank you, Daniel, for sharing with us again.
Thanks so much.